Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. We like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, designers, and dreamers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. In this week's episode, we are delighted to have Sarah Reid as our guest. She takes us on a captivating journey, starting from a quaint East Coast bookstore cafe, venturing to San Francisco, and eventually returning to her family's picturesque AFrame in Deering, New Hampshire. Sarah's career trajectory began in the nonprofit and social justice sectors before she stumbled upon her passion and drug, interior design. Fueled by her newfound love, she dedicated herself to formal education in the field. When the COVID-19 pandemic struck, she made the bold decision to leave the West Coast and her design firm behind, return to the East Coast to embark on an ambitious renovation project, transforming her family's AFrame into their primary residence. Sarah's exceptional work has garnered her recognition with features on HGTV and various publications, and today she thrives as an interior design consultant, eagerly taking on projects of all sizes, especially those involving smaller spaces. Hope you enjoy the episode.
Awesome. I'm so excited for this conversation. I have so many questions though, so we'll see how much we can get done in an hour. And if we have to do another one, we can do another one.
Yay. I'm so excited too. I listened to your last episode and I was like, ooh, I hope I get to talk about fashion.
Oh, I did not have that on your list. Don't hesitate to jump in and tell me what I might be missing.
All right.
Okay, but I actually, with yours, would kind of like to start big picture and zoom in. And usually I kind of start with the specific house and zoom out. But you have so much, I don't know, so much to talk about. And I feel like the bigger picture context might really be helpful. So
Great.
Can you start by introducing yourself and what you do in the real world? I think that's going to help people understand the frame of reference you're bringing to this.
Okay. Yes. My name is Sarah Reid and I'm trying to figure out what to call myself. I used to be an interior designer in the Bay Area, and then COVID hit and we moved to this cabin. And I feel more like an interior consultant at this point, because a designer, you think of a firm and really fancy renderings and spending a lot of money. And I've really found that the remote work I love to do is more suited to just kind of an hourly, everyday people of all budgets, just want a little hand holding and a little guidance. And so I'll do like a 4-hour job and give them all my ideas, and then that's it. So I don't feel comfortable calling that an interior designer at this point, but there's not really a great way to put it. But I help people with their interiors.
Okay, but that's good context, because I think when people go to your Instagram account or your website and see your place, that's going to be one of the first questions they ask, because I do think the aesthetic is really notable and really different from a lot I've seen. And so knowing that you have an experience in this, I'm also going to ask you some questions about design because you have that background. I love interior design. I'm not good at it, but love learning. And so I feel like what you're describing, the consultant piece, is really this vital role that is kind of missing in the interior design world, because a lot of the designers I've met want full control over it. I totally get that.
Yep. And they want to do a full house. The way that I've been describing it to people lately is, you know how it's really hard to get an electrician to call you back when you only need like one plug or one fan?
Yes.
Like, I'm the interior consultant for that. Like, I will come in and do all the little quick things. I can also like design from studs in, like that's what I was trained to do. That's what I was doing for 8 years in the Bay Area. But I'm willing to be that electrician who comes in for an hour or two. And most firms want to do a whole house. They're just not even taking work. So.
Oh my gosh, I've been limping my way through my own primary house because nobody would take it on, and I'm just about to tackle another room. We're going to talk later. This is not relevant. This is not relevant to our audience unless they want to hire you. So I'll move on, but I'm very excited to hear this description. Okay, but you also went to school for social justice, worked in the nonprofit world, and owned and ran a cafe. Can you tell us how, what do all these experiences have in common? Because they all seem so different.
Yeah, they were. I'm a kind of context large picture, but yeah, we only have an hour, so I'm going to try to rein myself in. I discovered feminism when I was really young, and social justice is my orientation. Like, it just is what naturally guides me through the world, and it really always has. And so I got a degree in women's studies from Smith. And oh, really?
I am also a women's studies major, not from Smith, but
well, I dropped out of high school. Like, it took me 7 years to get there. I had a baby, there was a lot in between, but they don't even call it women's studies anymore. I feel like very old when I say that.
Yep. It was women and gender studies when I went,
Okay,
but I think
okay.
they're probably dropping the women, and it's probably just gender studies.
Definitely. I think so. So I was going to save the world. I got an internship at Ms. Magazine. I worked with Gloria Steinem for a summer. Like,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, I was really on a tear. And then I became really depressed, really confronting the inequity of everything, and especially patriarchy, which is the thing that I feel most personally. And so
how long did it take you for you to hit that point? You were doing all these seemingly, like, from the outside, I hear that and I'm like, holy shit, you are killing it. How long did it take to hit that point of feeling overwhelmed?
I would say about 7 years. Like, it was around, I was 27 when I graduated from Smith, and was just, I had been in school for 7 years working and raising my son. So I had just felt really saturated by that point. It didn't mean that I got out of the nonprofit world. So I was like, I don't know what to do with feminism. I wish people told me I couldn't make a living. I guess people probably tried to tell me I couldn't make a living, but I didn't listen to them.
My mom told me that a lot.
Yeah. What are you going to do with that?
Yeah. Despite being the feminist that introduced me to women's studies, she was like, but that's not really a job, is it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was graduating from Smith, and I moved to this very small community in Western Massachusetts, and there was this beautiful old mill on the river that had a used bookstore in it, and this very cute boy working there. And I was like, hello. And within a couple months, within a couple months we were dating, and it became really clear that the bookstore was going to go out of business if there wasn't a cafe in the building. The building is like 25 minutes from anywhere remotely town, or like there was just no commerce whatsoever. So people weren't coming to the bookstore because there was nowhere to like settle and get a coffee or a beer or something. So we just, oh my God, spontaneously decided to open a cafe together. He was 24 and I was 27, and I had waitressed, but we had no idea what we were doing. And we spent 6 months and took classes at the local CDC. And is that CDC? Yeah, Community Development Corporation. We scraped together money with investors and opened this cafe 6 months later. And it was like going to 3 grad schools all at once. We only had a couple employees. We worked 100-hour weeks. We made no money. But it is where I made all of my best friends. It became central to the community, and it's still there 20 years later. Like, and for a cafe, that's pretty rare. So I feel really proud that it's still there. We would have, like, on election night, we would invite literally everyone in town. There's 800 people in town, like, come on down. We really tried to be a hub, and we were.
Have they made a Hallmark movie out of this yet?
Hey,
yes, I'm a big fan of Hallmark movies, and this is just like the sweetest story.
Well, it's interesting. Like, a lot of people hear that I owned a cafe and they think it's so romantic. And when we were working there, people thought, just, this is so romantic. I mean, it's a gorgeous old building on a river. But very quickly in the process, I realized, one, I'm a creator. I loved creating the cafe. I am not a sustainer. That was a huge lesson for me to learn. So I was my son was like 10 at home, which was only 2 doors down, but like putting himself to sleep. And I just got really sad. I was like, I'm just mopping the same floor. I'm making the same sandwich. It doesn't feel special anymore. So, and not making any money. And like,
Yeah.
it's not as romantic as you think, but it is a really sweet story. So after 3 years, we sold that. And then I was like, well, I do, if I'm going to have a career, like go to an office and do something, it should be in the nonprofit world. So I got into administration with the local nonprofits in the area in Western Mass, and ended up being kind of an outreach director for an education center, which meant a lot to me. It was like 3 of the best years of my life. But nonprofits, the whole structure of nonprofits in this country and why we have them and how they run and the way that boards run and how donations run, you're just living in scarcity all the time. And I grew up in scarcity, and then I was on welfare with my son, and it just was taking a toll, feeling like I had to be scraping by all the time and watching all these other people scrape by and these organizations doing the best work scraping by. And it again, like with how I was going to save the world with feminism, it was just like I guess I'm not built for sustained activity in that world, which makes me sad about myself. I would love to be a social justice warrior still, and I do what I can.
But it is, I mean, I was in education for years and then left, and it was the right thing to do for me personally. But that conflict between what I want to do and aspire to do for the world and what I can survive doing is very real.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did that until I was 36. And then my son turned 18, and that cute boy, we were still together. And so
I was going to ask what happened.
He helped me raise my son. And when my son turned 18, my boyfriend at the time became my husband, got a job, and they asked him to move to San Francisco. So I was like 36, and I was like, I'm an empty nester. I'm kind of burnt out on nonprofits. Should we move to San Francisco? And I started looking at, I just had this amazing pivotal moment actually in this AFrame where I was painting and I was listening to loud music. I was by myself. I was bringing up lamps that I had bought and thrifted. And I just was like, can I do this? This is how I feel most alive, really alive. Like it feels like drugs when I'm working on a room.
Yeah.
And interior design just was not a thing in my family or in the community that I grew up in. I didn't even know that it was a thing. Of course, I knew there were shows and magazines, but I had no idea how you would get to do that.
Yeah.
And so I applied to grad school and started watching Secrets of a Stylist with Emily Henderson on HGTV. And she's still my favorite.
Yeah.
And realized like, oh, you can do design and styling. And I don't know exactly how I want to do it, but let's go to grad school.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I have a couple gaps that I want to fill in. Were you born and raised in Massachusetts?
I was born in southern New Hampshire, right? The town over from here. But then I was raised in Western Mass. Yeah. With my mom.
Okay.
My dad is always in here.
Okay. And then you were there until you moved to the Bay Area.
Yep. Yeah. So I was 36 when we moved.
When did the AFrame come into your life? Because you mentioned when you were talking about moving, you were there. How and where did it come into your life?
Yeah. So the AFrame, man, I could talk for hours about. So the AFrame is in Deering, New Hampshire, and my grandparents built it in 1963. They were living on the South Shore of Massachusetts, and they got out a little compass. I actually have one here where you put the point in and you draw, and they just did a 2-hour radius from their house and started looking for land. And they found these like 6-7 acres, and it was $400, which adjusted for inflation is still only like $6,000-7,000. Like they were living in a very different time. They weren't rich. They were total working class, but they were able to buy it. So
What was their goal when they were looking for that land? What was their goal, their vision? You know?
They were such interesting people. They wanted a weekend camp. They were really comfortable living very off-grid. They took baths in the stream. They had a rainwater catchment system. They love reading and playing dominoes at night. Like, they didn't need much more, not fancy people at all. So they had 3 kids, and I think they wanted a retreat. They always, as a family, they camped and drove across country, and they just loved being outdoors. So their goal was just to have a little place to retreat to. I think, I could be lying, but I think maybe they were kind of forecasting into the future. Because a couple years later, when the Peace Corps was established, they joined that. And this became kind of where they came home to, but then they would spend winters serving on Peace Corps trips.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it was always just a summer place. And so I grew up coming here because my dad eventually built a house across the street, and that's where he's been my whole life. So on weekends when I would come up and see him, we would walk over to the AFrame and have dinner and play dominoes.
Yeah.
So it's always been in my
does.
life. Yeah. But then my grandfather died when I was 16, and my grandmother still used it, but eventually couldn't. And it just sat here. And I have photos, actually. They left like their slippers by their chairs and their toothbrushes by the sink, and like it was as if they just got up and left one day, and it just sat here. And in 2011, so New Hampshire has no sales or income tax, but it does have property tax, and it was just too expensive to pay the property taxes if nobody was going to use it. So my dad called and said, we're probably going to have to sell it, and maybe a family friend might want it. And I just burst into tears. And my boyfriend at the time, we weren't making any money. I was at a nonprofit. Was just like, we will figure it out. We'll buy your aunts out. This is so important to you. Let's do it. So we were able to buy my aunts out, and my dad donated his third to me. And so we've had it since 2011, but only in 2017 did we put in water, and electricity was a little before then. So we're not off grid anymore. We were just using it on weekends when we were in Massachusetts, and then we would come for 2 or 3 weeks in the summer when we were living in the Bay Area. So it was a retreat. It was a camp, very rustic. The mice got into it every winter. It was a cabin,
Yeah.
you know?
Or a true camp, because my family's all in Maine, and that is camp life.
Yeah.
My dad grew up in New Hampshire, and
Oh,
so I can just like picture if your parent is like right across the street, all of those reasons. It's just so compelling of like, you could come up and visit with your dad, but also have your own place across the street.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great. And, you know, I'm sure we would have done it had it been another structure, but I have to say that the AFrame has always been incredibly special to me. That was an added element. Like, we have to keep the AFrame. It wasn't just the cabin. So then COVID hit, and we were paying $3,500 a month for an apartment in Oakland. And I loved this place. It was a huge loft in an old warehouse kind of situation.
You probably designed the shit out of that.
Oh my God, I did. I became a muralist, actually. It was crazy. It was amazing.
Oh my God, please send me pictures if you have some, and I'll drop them in the YouTube version.
Yeah. Okay. It was so fun. We had only been there for 11 months, and then COVID hit. And very quickly, I was like, this is going to go on for a long time. And my business dried up overnight. Like, everyone I was working with was like, we don't even know if we're getting paychecks. Like, we have to stop.
But in like 4 months, that changed so quickly.
I know. If we had stayed, I would be so successful.
Yeah.
I would be
Well, you've been featured in multiple books and TV shows. You are quite successful, but I hear what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah. My career would have been very healthy there. But at the time, it was like the vendors I was in the middle of projects with,
Yep.
like I would reach out and be like, hey, are we going to get that rug? And I would get an email like, so-and-so doesn't work here anymore, and just, it was really, bewildering, obviously, to everyone. And my husband's work didn't care if he worked remotely. So I pretty quickly was like, we have this cabin, like it has electricity and water now. What if we ask my dad, who is a builder, could he winterize it? And let's just go live there. And maybe we come back. We probably come back. So I called him like in April and 2020 and said, can you have it ready by July? And he said, okay. And then I called him and I was like, can you have it ready by June? And he was like, his love language is acts of service. And
Thank God.
Yeah. Oh my God. I am the luckiest.
Yeah.
I am the luckiest. He didn't tell me how hard it was, but he worked really hard and he enlisted a lot of friends. And
Was he retired?
Um,
How was he able to do that?
no. Well, he at the time was the estate manager for an estate up the road. So he was in charge of like the grounds and making sure everything was safe and good up at that estate. But the owner of the estate only visits like 3 or 4 times a year. So it wasn't like a full, he was going to work every day.
Right.
Like, so he was able to do it. And he, of course, he and my stepmom were very excited that we might be across the street because it's very rural here. Besides us, we are surrounded by dozens and dozens and dozens of acres of Audubon and other preserves. So they were like neighbors and our daughter. And so he got it done. And we got here in June. So it was really, really quick. So now we're here.
If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. I have some big picture questions to ask you, but you don't actually rent the secret A-frame because you live there. You rent the guest house. Did you build that, or was that a structure that you renovated?
Great question. So can I just back up a little to give you more context? I would love to talk to you about Instagram someday. I had like my personal business profile, which is Small Victories Design. And then when the A-frame was chosen to be in this book, The Modern A-frame, we were still only using it as a retreat. It was before we lived here. I was like, oh, I think I should have a profile for this because the book is going to come out and we could Airbnb it. So in my head, this was going to be the Airbnb. And I got in touch with Chris and Pam. I did all the things and
who speak very highly of you, by the way.
Oh, I love
Pam and
them.
I messaged the other day and she's like, you have to have Sarah on the podcast. She thinks you guys are so rad.
Cool. Yeah, they're so awesome. That was a really, really nice visit with them. So all of a sudden I have the secret A-frame kind of cabin profile for this place, but then I'm like, well, we're moving into it. Guess what? You can't rent it.
You can still admire it, but you can't have it. It's mine.
Yeah. And I had kind of like entered into the cabin community, as you know so well, on Instagram. I'm definitely not hugely active and I don't like DM with a lot of people, but in that profile, I only follow cabins. So I feel like when I go into that world, it's just like all the cabin stuff in one place.
Yeah.
And so then what happened was, besides my dad and us, there's this tiny little cabin in the woods behind our house that was built by friends of my grandparents. Well, they became friends when they built houses so close to each other in the 60s. So I grew up knowing them, the painters. They would come up on weekends, and it has been empty since the 90s, and the mice really got to it. The kids moved to California. The parents were no longer able to come. So it was pretty gross. Just,
Yeah.
you'd walk in, the smell was like, and it was orange knotty pine, and it was it was great in the 60s, and it was no longer like anything that I would want to live in or rent out. So it was there sitting empty, and there was an arrangement. This is kind of convoluted, but the guy that my dad worked for, the estate owner,
Yep.
had first dibs on the cabin, because this guy buys up land all around Deering and puts it into preserves. So a third of Deering
Huh.
is in preservation because of this guy.
Which probably explains why it's still so remote. If he's
Yeah.
kind of protecting all the land, nobody can move there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's when a house comes up for sale, it never even gets on the market because
Yeah.
people snatch them up. So this place, the family was finally like, hey, you have first dibs? Do you want it? And he asked my dad, who asked me, do you want it? Because he actually doesn't want it. And we collectively felt like, oh, that would be so weird if a stranger bought this cabin 300 feet from our house,
Yeah.
surrounded by nothing. So we said yes. And I told you, I'm happy to talk about numbers. It cost $90,000. So it's not like we're like super millionaires buying up all the land around us. It was
Right.
like, I do feel queasy about like, well, we had to buy it. We couldn't have a stranger, but in my daily lived life here, having a stranger that close would have made me probably not want to live here,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. It was part of the appeal of your grandparents'
Yeah.
cabin.
Yeah. And there was a high chance that they would build a huge house closer to the road
Right.
and all the things.
Right.
So
You just can't guarantee who will buy it, what they
no,
will do with it, who they will be.
nope. And in New Hampshire, what we have to do around here is outdoor things. So a lot of, ATVs and a lot of snowmobiles and stuff. So that would probably be, I don't know. Yeah. So we bought it. My dad and my stepmom generously bought it because we couldn't at the time, but then we bought it from them eventually. So it just became a renovation project for 2 years with my dad, which was wonderful. He gutted it and I redesigned it, and it's not winterized, and we can't snowplow, so we would only work in the summer. And it was a great project for me to have as a designer because I wasn't working all that much and I didn't really know what my career was going to do, but at least I had this project. And working with my dad is really, it's special. It's he's not he's going to watch this. He's not a great teacher. So he's definitely it's mostly just him pointing at things, telling get the thing and do the thing, and me trying to figure out what that means.
Yeah.
But
But at least you had very different zones of genius, right? Like he's
yeah,
very much the hands-on and you have the vision and the
totally.
aesthetic so
Yeah.
that he probably didn't interfere too much on that
Yeah.
side.
Yeah, totally.
How did your relationship change through those 2 years?
Me and my dad?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think on the one hand, we grew much closer, because I didn't live with him when I grew up. I only came up on weekends. having a daily relationship with him was very new and cool. And so I feel much more bonded and close. I was always madly in love with my dad as a kid. Like, he could do no wrong. I would cry when I left for the weekend. Like, um, and I definitely put him on a pedestal. And so, like, I feel bonded and closer, but I also, like, know him much more as a full human being. So I see the bad moods and the get the thing in the thing, and he gets frustrated with me when I don't know what that means. So
Yeah.
there's more friction, but there's also more love, I think. Or like real love that's based in something really real, knowledge of each other.
Yeah. Yeah, the small intimacies that aren't always beautiful or seemingly beautiful, but it creates a more complete relationship
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah.
Which when
Totally.
you're a kid, you don't always get to see those things as much. I mean, you see the bad moods, but it's usually like when you do something wrong versus as an adult, you get to see the bad moods that have nothing to do with you. It just is who they are as a
Right.
human.
They're just being a person.
That's
Totally.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool to discover that side of our parents and learn who they are outside of us,
Yeah.
outside of that relationship where you have to care for me. Well, you don't anymore. Now
Yeah.
we're kind of in this together. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your
Totally.
favorite memory from those 2 years with him during the build?
Hmm. I don't know if there's a specific memory, but the thing that comes to mind is anytime I have a good idea and ask him to help me execute it, like there's a sectional in the guest house where I was looking at all these really expensive sectionals and thinking about what upholstery I would want. And my friend Caitlin was like, when you go to a place like this, you really just want to nap and read and lie down and don't get like some stiff mid-century
Hmm.
sectional. And I
Mhm.
was like,
She's
oh
not
my
wrong.
no, I know. I was like, 1, yes, and 2, what if I just got 2 twin beds and built a sectional around it with my dad, who's capable of doing
Mm.
that, and then those become little beds for people's kids or whatever. Um, so I asked my dad if we could build it, and this applies to everything we build together. He just always steps back and tells me how proud he is of me. Like, oh,
Really?
right, yeah. He just, he's very vocal about his love and pride. Sorry.
Acts of service and words of affirmation is such an unusual combination. That's really
Yeah,
beautiful.
he's so he just sometimes he won't even shut up about it. It's like, "Okay, I know. That's
Mm.
great. You're so proud of me." It's really nice.
Mhm.
So whenever we work together, he'll just step back, put his arm around me, and just like, "Oh, kid, just look at this." You know.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, so I will say, like, COVID brought me there was an alternate life where I would still be in the Bay Area and I would be visiting him and my mom, who lives an hour and a half away, who I see often. I would be visiting maybe twice a year. And, my mom's turning 80, my dad is 76. Like, there is a real reality where I could have seen them 10 more times in my life.
Yeah.
And now I see them all the time. And
Yeah.
that is such a blessing.
Think about all the time how much our worlds have changed with the creation of the internet because people can work remotely and we go to school different. It's not just the internet, but we started going to college, right? This idea of like you can go anywhere you want, which is empowering, but also slowly separates families.
Totally.
And the
Totally. Yeah.
it's the same reason I wanted to build a cabin in Maine because my mom's side of the family is there. And when she passed away, I was like, well, the connector is gone. I either put in the work to have a relationship with them or I don't see them anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
did the same thing. And
Yeah.
now you're right there, like literally across the street from your
Yeah.
dad, working side by
Yeah.
side with him, getting to see your
Yeah.
mom all the time.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah. Okay. So you spent 2 years renovating the guest house with him with the
Yes.
vision of being an Airbnb. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. So this was our first season and I kind of approached this year as a big experiment year. Let's just see what happens for a year. I don't have
Yeah.
to if I tell myself I have to do something for the rest of my life, I will freak out. So it was just let's just see what it's like to run an Airbnb and it's only 6 months. So
Yeah.
not even. So
Because you just rent it it's not winterized, so it's just seasonal. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, May 15th to October 15th. So we're
Okay.
closing. We're getting close.
You're
Yeah.
almost done with your first season.
I'm almost
Congratulations.
done. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's been a real education. It's been nerve-wracking in the beginning. It's been largely totally amazing people's emotional response to the place.
Okay, I can imagine one of the challenges with designing that space, like kind of a complete, I'm imagining just from the picture you painted in my head of what it looked like, that it was pretty much a straight gut rebuild, almost a new build in that regard. On the same property, right next to this old family heirloom. And I love what you said in your pre-interview about how to build a new cabin and imbue it with old soul. How
Yeah.
did you approach that in the design process? Because that was a big challenge for me. I fell in love with old cabins and then I was building a new one. How
Yeah.
do I not make it feel like a brand new cabin, but have that feeling of like life has been lived here?
Right. Yeah. And I've thought about your cabin and how you did that. I think you were very successful. I haven't been
Yeah.
there, but I've seen photos.
Well, you need to
Um,
come.
I totally want to.
Okay.
Yeah, so I am a huge thrifter. So every lamp in there is a vintage lamp. There isn't one new lamp. Um, I had them all rewired. All the furniture is vintage. Not the rugs. It's so much vintage because I knew everything else would feel new. I wanted that mix. And when it comes to vintage furniture, it was all built so much better
Yeah.
than new stuff. So so I think people worry like, oh, if we do antiques, they'll break. And like, well, don't buy the rickety chair that's 200 years old. But like, if you get the upholstered lounge seat from the 50s, that thing's rock solid,
Yeah.
So I did that. And I honestly, I don't know how to design spaces that aren't full of patina.
Hmm.
You had said on your last episode that you've started muting some people you follow. And I also,
Oh my God, I was so nervous. I was like, should I have said that?
sorry to bring it up again. Janice is muting you. No, I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram, as we all do. And I follow a lot of new A-frames. And because I grew up with the class background that I grew up in, I don't have complete confidence in my own style yet. I hope that I get there. It's a constant work in progress. But part of me sees these new builds where everything is perfect and perfectly chosen and feels like, oh, I'm the weird, quirky girl walking into the cafeteria again. Who's going to want to sit with me? I don't know. And yet I don't know how. I wouldn't even know how to do that. If you gave me the budget, I just wouldn't know. So I think that's an unsatisfying answer because I don't even know. I buy vintage things. I like what I like. I use it. I really, actually, you will appreciate this. Very few people do. As a women's studies major and a person concerned with patriarchy, it was really important to me that the cabin not feel really masculine.
Hmm.
And I did that with my cafe. We named it after a female pirate, the Lady Killigrew. And for table bases, we used sewing machine bases. I wanted to reference like typical female work.
Yeah.
And so in the guest house, like the cushions for the banquette are all covered in unfinished quilts that I've found at antique stores that women have hand pieced together, So I upholstered the cushions with that. So
That's beautiful.
if I find a piece of beautiful embroidery, I would like to remind people of women's work. And so most of the art is female centered and there's
Yeah.
pink. I'm not avoiding pink.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. This is so wonderful to hear because there are a couple cabins that I haven't muted everyone. Anyone that I have personal relationships with, I haven't muted. I like to keep up with what they're doing. It's more that feeling of like keeping up, right? And so there's a couple
Yeah.
that I don't know personally that I haven't muted, and they're more in the style you're describing. Because my dream, if we ever build another cabin, we've started calling it in our house Dead Grandpa's Cabin, because we really, really want for everything to be repurposed. And actually we go back and forth. Sometimes it's Dead Grandma's Cabin and sometimes it's Dead Grandpa's Cabin. But we didn't do that with this one because there was so much pressure to like get it done and whatever, but really taking our time with the next one and doing it all intentionally in a quirky, in the way that you're describing. So I think we need to see more of it. We need to see more that there is not just one way to do this. And that's the way that a lot of them are starting to look. But there's 179 different ways to do this, or 179,000 different ways to do this, because there's that many different people who are doing it, and that your personality is not only welcomed, but encouraged, because that's exactly what we need.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear about the way that you are approaching that. And I love looking at your pictures for that reason, but
thanks.
Yeah.
It's been fun. It's I think it was helpful that I didn't go into designing it like, this is my Airbnb and I will run it forever, and it is important that it is booked all the time. I was like, if I get 50% occupancy, I'll be happy. It is not a moneymaker for me. It is figuring out if I want to do it. But again, I'm a creator, not necessarily a sustainer. And I'm the housekeeper. I'm everything. I greet every guest. I meet them. I write the notes. I was over there at 9 a.m. lighting a fire for the people coming this afternoon, like, so I was doing it as an Airbnb, but also just as a project for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds like similar reasons that drove the cafe, of just that creating a place that is special to people.
Yeah.
Whether it's the people in that town who need this bookshop and cafe, or whether it's people who are traveling and need a space. I see that similarity there. In what you're creating.
Yeah. We had no idea if anyone would come to Deering, New Hampshire. That was another thing. I'm the fourth Airbnb in this entire town, and 2 of them are huge old houses, and one of them is a camper. So there's no reason for you to be in Deering, New Hampshire. There's literally not. So we were like, I don't know, let's see. And it turns out that people coming from New York and Boston, and then some on road trips, do find us. And I think that they find us because they're looking for a certain area in New Hampshire, and our photos are good.
Yeah.
I think,
And I do think the Airbnb's new search capabilities, that the priority is more like, what kind of place are you looking for? And actually, like, I'm willing to travel. I just want to get hours from home and stay someplace cool. Your place would totally stand out, versus I'm going to this town, what's available.
Exactly. Yep.
I can imagine that helped a lot.
Yep.
Where did the name The Guest House come from?
Oh, thank you for asking. I feel like it's so generic, and I cringe a little saying it, but I'm really committed to it, because I was out on a kayak. So the guest house is on a beaver pond, and the Audubon owns that land, but we have kayaks we're allowed to go out in. And I was out there, and there is a Beaver Lodge, and I was looking at the guest house, and there's so much quiet out there. And I just was like, oh, I am a guest of the beavers here. I do not own this land. I've always felt uncomfortable saying we own this land when you have this much nature around you. For me, it feels really hard to say. I feel like I'm a steward. I feel like I'm parked here for a while. I'm really grateful, but we don't mow. We don't have a lawn. We're not trying to keep animals away. We're not trying to control anything here. So I just was looking at the Beaver Lodge, and I was like, oh, we're guests. And I really want people who are staying in the guest house to feel like a guest of this land. Not me, not the house, but like Deering.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it when we're on our land and we hear the barred owls, or we see nests, or we see the deer. And I think I've never thought of it quite the way you just described it. I've never thought like we are guests, but I think all the time about how we've disrupted their lives and how their lives have changed because of our presence, and what we can do about that. And And I don't know that there's good answers other than I love that Tammy, our caretaker, will throw like apple cores and stuff out in the woods for the deer. I don't actually know if that's a good environmental thing or not, but I love that
Yeah.
it keeps them coming back and is like a small
Yeah.
nod to like, you are welcome here. You don't need to
Totally.
disappear because
Yeah.
we're here.
Right.
Because it
Yes.
is, that's the hard thing. You renovated, it's the hard thing about building is literally you fall in love with this piece of land. And then the very first step of the project is let's go ahead and go in and cut down a bunch of trees.
Yeah, totally.
And the
Yep.
land feels different than what it did before. And it's like, how do I reconcile this love of this piece of land and desire to be here? And also, I am destroying and disrupting.
Totally. Yep. Yep. I think we have found what we are comfortable with here with the AFrame and the guest house.
Yeah.
But it's part of why I don't want to put in a septic. I'm never going to winterize that. I don't want people there in the winter. I want it to kind of go fallow in the winter. We put up a game cam in the winter, and there's a bobcat and a bear and a coyote, and I just kind of want to leave that for them. And, light use in the summer.
Yeah. Can I go back and ask one more design question? Because when
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Dead Grandma's Cabin, I'm always thinking about the struggle of like step one of the design is kind of creating a mood board or a vision. I'm sure you know this, or maybe you can talk us through how you do that.
Yeah.
And that's easy when you can then go online to Wayfair and like start sourcing items and clip them and put them into a Pinterest and you get a really good idea of what goes together. That's a whole lot harder when you're just going to antique store after antique store and trying to find items and then hope they fit into this mood board. How do you approach that when you're not buying new?
Okay. Well, one, the Dead Grandma's cabin is what we would call in grad school your concept. That's what you start out with. And I think what I would do from there is that I would actually treat it like a nonprofit. A nonprofit has a mission statement, and you get your board to write it really, really clearly so that everything you are doing is contained within that mission statement. And anytime you're making a decision, you can check your mission statement and say, wait, do these have a relationship? It kind of is like when you're bowling, you put up the gutter guards, like it's a container for all your decision making. And so I would do a lot of mind mapping from that concept. I would think about what that means to me. Does it mean quilts? Does it mean Afghans? Does it mean portraits of women? Does it mean it would mean different things for different people, but for me, it would be like the stained glass kitchen table, 80s scalloped light. I would write down everything that means to me. And then you have like your shopping list, I think.
So it almost sounds like I really need to clarify who my dead grandma is. This is so funny because obviously I have dead grandma, so it could be one of them.
Yeah.
But I almost like this idea of all of our dead grandmas, right? It's not necessarily mine, but like you're going to, but to do that cohesively, to really create an avatar of dead grandma and like, and think about what would dead grandma put here? Like what kind of lamp would she want? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And oh my God, this is so fun. Can I design this for you? Oh my God.
Yes, please. I literally have yes.
She has like this woman has like those candy dishes. She has a collection of them though. Like, and that's a beautiful display you have.
She has like 3 too many.
Yeah.
You're like, Grandma, I like these, but like maybe let's get rid of a couple.
I wouldn't go so far as to like cover the sofa in plastic, but I might do a nod to that somewhere, like, I never design like literally, I don't do time capsule. I always like mixing it all up. So, the other thing that I always say to people is in general, if you are in a thrift store or an antique store and something moves you and you love it and you can afford it and you want to buy it, you should keep a collection of it. And your love of all those things is literally going to show through as the thread of why all of these things exist. They will become more cohesive in a space because you loved them and you chose them. Yeah. I really, really believe that. There are occasionally people who love so many things that it is too disparate and crazy, but I think for you specifically, I think that would totally work.
Yeah.
And if something is a little off, that makes it better.
Yeah.
Makes it more dynamic and charismatic.
But this is where I think the love-hate relationship with Instagram comes in, because Cozy Rock has been so successful for us because people have found us via Instagram, and then
Right.
that fills our booking calendar.
Right.
But so that emphasizes the pressure to me. Like, if I don't have an Instagram for it that's successful, will I be able to book? So then that leads to this, like, oh, so it has to be like perfectly aesthetic, right? And
Right.
this is where you probably feel that quirkiness, like, do I fit in here? And I feel this like desire to be more quirky, to like,
Yeah.
okay, I
Yeah.
did everything quotations right in the first one, and it
Right.
has worked. And I do love it. It's not that I don't love those, but I want a little more quirk.
Yeah.
And then fear, like, how does this aesthetic digital world
Yeah.
respond to that, right? And
Yeah.
then if it is a business and you're renting it and need to rent
Yeah.
it, then how does that all play together?
Yep.
But I really
Totally.
think, to what we originally said, we really just need more people leaning into the quirk. And
Yeah.
I think this is all going
Yeah.
to equalize in a matter of time. We don't all want to stay at the same cabin in different
Yeah.
locations. We really don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I agree. Yeah. And I was also, I don't know about North Carolina, or I know that the markets really, really are different everywhere. But for me, my experience here is, of all the guests this summer, and I've been at 87% occupied. Like,
Amazing.
yeah, like I took a lot of days off. I let myself travel. But of all the days that I booked, 87% was booked. And one of those guests knew me on Instagram.
Yeah. See, I feel too much pressure, I think, then, because
Yeah.
we've been 100% booked from day one.
Yeah.
And I think like 95% of them came from Instagram. And there's advantages to that. But I think if we hadn't had an Instagram account, I think our occupancy would still be pretty good. Probably not 100, but it would still sustain itself.
Yeah.
And if I'm doing something I love and really leaning into something that's fun, who cares?
Yeah.
It doesn't
No,
need to be that way. That's so good to hear, Sarah.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And that's very encouraging. I think that's helpful
Thank
for
you.
me.
Yeah. Well, you have I would think that you have such a big audience and fans that they would love to go see your next creation.
And meet dead grandma as best as they can.
Yes. And then there's those niche Instagram people who love dead grandmas. You just
I
tap
know.
into that vein.
I know. There's people, Alexis and I talked about this a while ago, but like, I think it's really good that different hosts have different visions, because there's just different guests who want different things.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
And I like that we can all make it more fun and enjoyable for ourselves, and then also reach different people. In fact, Ethan was just telling me about this cabin. I don't remember where it was, but it's like a witch themed cabin. And it is, Sarah, their Instagram does not do it justice. I would share the name, but I can't remember it. I'll try and share it on Instagram somewhere. It is the coolest place I've ever seen. I would go and stay there just because it's so different from everything else I've seen.
Right. That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
my takeaway was, I think there's a place for dead grandma here in this
I
Airbnb world.
I definitely think so.
How did you budget for the Airbnb and the design? Because I think that's a big question for people who are renovating and building. Obviously, everyone asks that. I know there's no good answer about what that number is, but like, how did you approach that in terms of, did you build in Airbnb revenue to that projection? How did you approach that?
No. Willy-nilly. Everything was done with pine wood, like as cheaply as possible. And my dad was the builder. So
That helps.
I would kind of just go, I would just go one by one, like, new floor, how much is that going to be? Okay, fine. We hired painters. How much is that going to be? Okay, fine. It needs a new roof. And we were doing these improvements, whether it was going to be an Airbnb or not. Like, the AFrame is so small. And with COVID, the only way that we could visit with people was to have a guest space. So we were doing it for family and friends too. So everything was done as cheaply as possible. There'd, go to Lowe's, get some cabinets off literally they were pre-built. Would I love to have amazing custom, maybe someday, but I didn't do the tiling I wanted to do. But all the lights were literally thrift store fine, like $5, and it cost $10 so I kept the receipts, and we'll do our taxes this year, and we'll see what that all means.
The moment of truth.
Yeah. But the the revenue, because I had no idea what to anticipate, and because we have an outhouse, there's a real limit to what I feel comfortable charging.
Yeah.
Even if like I had 100,000 followers and people were like knocking down the door, I still would feel really uncomfortable going past what I already do. And so I knew that my maximum was going to be somewhere between 15 and 18,000 for the summer.
Yeah.
So it's not like we were looking to make all our money back or make up what we spent on the guest house at first. So our approach has just kind of been like, anything is great. It's helpful. Let's do the work we would want to do anyway.
Yeah. Because it's a family property. It's not going anywhere. The vision, I think, seems for you all first and foremost.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
longevity's sake, and how beautiful that you're preserving the memories of your grandparents, but then also that cabin too. I think it's really beautiful to bring cabins back to life and houses back to life.
Yeah.
Says someone who built new, but I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. What's been so wonderful is the daughter of the people who built the guest house has been able to come a couple times, and she has so many great stories and is just so appreciative and kind about what we've done. She could, be like, well, we didn't do it that way, but she's not at all. She's so good and nice about it. And so that, of course, has meant a lot to us too.
Yeah. Have you sat around the fire sharing those memories?
Not yet, not the fire, but
I mean, that's just the perfect place to do it.
I know. Yeah, but she wanted to come this October and we were booked. And that was sad.
Yeah.
So
the problem with your high occupancy.
Yeah. We're going to have to figure out something for next year. I'm going to like reconfigure how I do it, like this was the experiment year. Now I've learned.
Yeah.
I can hone in next year.
What was the biggest thing you learned for anyone out there who hasn't started hosting yet?
Oh my God. Oh God. You got another hour? Human beings are wild. They are fascinating.
You know more than most of us hosts, because most of us are not on site getting to meet all of them. You have such a rare insight.
Yeah. I see their trash. Like,
that tells you so much. It's so true. We sometimes don't have our cleaner clean before we come. We just give her the option. She can if she wants to, but if she'd rather the day off, we're like, we'll just clean. It's fine. And the trash, how much trash, it's so telling.
Totally. It's amazing. So I would say to new hosts, first and foremost, even if I'm a perfectionist, I'm a problem solver, I love to think through all the things, and I thought that I had, and there were just things you just cannot anticipate what people are going to do in your space. You just can't. So you need to be ready for anything and don't have anything in there that you truly, truly care about. I care about all my stuff, but I have given it away in my heart.
That's smart. That's really good advice. Not just not care, but give it away ahead of time. It's given. It's away. It's not mine.
It's no longer mine.
Yeah.
And maybe, this is my first season. I don't know, but maybe don't splurge. I don't know. It would be interesting to hear what you have to say about it. I bought this beautiful British hot water kettle. It was gorgeous. I have directions on how to use the French press. Someone tried to make coffee in the kettle. So the bottom of it was just burnt coffee grounds, to the point where it was ruined. And I was like, this is why we can't have nice things. So dumb it down a little. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think that's great advice. I have been to a couple new Airbnbs, and there's always telltale signs of okay, that won't be here the next time I come. I promise you. It's lovely. I enjoy it. But and maybe I'm just cynical. I wonder that too, because it's been 9 years of hosting, but I definitely agree. Plain old tea kettle, plain old drip coffee machine. I love pour over, but it's not worth it. It's breakable. Everyone knows how to use a coffee machine.
Yep.
I do agree with that.
And then you have to get into labels. I was like, well, I could buy another electric kettle, but then I would have to put a label on it that said, don't make coffee in this, and I really don't want to do that all around. So.
I know. My thought on it's so interesting, because my thought on labels isn't aesthetic so much as it is the feeling it invokes, which is that someone's watching you. And
Totally.
I really want for people when they rent the cabin for it to be theirs truly. I actually don't even really want them to think about us when they're there. I want them to think about us for the first time when they're filling out the guest book at the end, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like addressing it to us. But other than that, I want it to feel like yours. And if there's signs everywhere directing them to what to do, it feels like.
Yeah, totally.
So I've always just removed things that might require a sign, though I will say I stayed in an A-frame that had labels and it was really helpful for the lighting. So I understand there's a time and place for labels, but okay. With only a couple of minutes left, I want to ask you about your cabin fashion and then our last question. What does your cabin fashion look like?
Okay. Well, it's really evolved from, sweatpants every day, COVID, because it was like COVID fashion.
Different from cabin fashion.
Yes. But in the last year, I've really tried to imbue some kind of style to myself. So at home, I'm allowed to wear sweatshirts and stuff. But when I leave the house, I have to have on something that I didn't buy at Target and that has some kind of pattern or something. And I've really fallen into this kind of nostalgic Moonrise Kingdom. I'm a scout leader. Or I'm a 12-year-old boy about to go like catch frogs. Like those are my two. I'm not wearing dresses anymore, sadly, but like I don't want just a wool shirt. Like this is a vintage one. It has like pleats up here and it's a little special.
Yeah.
It's
on
like
top of another patterned shirt.
Yeah. Well, it's freezing in my house. We're not turning on the heat and it's like 60 degrees. So
do you have a wood stove?
No, we have a little gas stove. That's fine. But it's like, it's about to be in the 70s in 2 days. And so I want to make it to October. So
our wood stove is getting installed in our house literally as we're having this podcast. So I'm so excited for our first fire tonight. It's supposed to be like 75, but we're probably going to light one anyway. It's not a good idea.
Do it. No, you can totally have them all summer. I realized people over at the guest house had fires all summer. It's just so special. It's great.
Yeah. Okay. And what makes a cabin to you?
Okay. I've thought about this a lot. I've thought about like if you have a log cabin, imagine a log cabin, and you put it in the middle of Manhattan, would it still be a cabin? Yes. So it's not necessarily setting for me because I'm so interior focused, so structure, architecture focused. Like, yes, it should probably be in the woods, but you put a cabin in Manhattan, it's still a cabin to me.
Yeah.
So then I think it has to do with size. I feel kind of gatekeepy about this, which I don't like about myself. But like, if you have 2 full floors, I don't know that you're a cabin. I think your second floor has to be compromised in some way, a little shorter or angled, or if it's a 2-story, it feels like a house.
Yeah. I love this characteristic. No one has said that before, but it is,
really?
It feels so true.
Like if you go into, I feel like then it turns into a lodge or a manor. Like it doesn't have to be a house, but then it's like, I think size is really important to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think it has to have an element of exposed wood, more exposed wood than a house.
Yeah.
Normally.
I agree.
I think those are my three. I will die on this hill.
I really think your description resonates with me more than any that I've ever heard, because the location one is hard for me. I do very much crave the nature setting, but I also have seen cabins in places that isn't a retreat. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily resonate with me that it has to be a vacation home because one, I don't think everyone can afford a vacation home and I don't want to limit that. I think people can live full time in a cabin.
Yep.
And so that one doesn't feel, this is a very subjective question. There is no right or wrong. I'm just speaking to what resonates with me.
Exactly.
But the compromised second floor really creates a visual description in my brain. Like I can see exactly what you're talking about with lofts and with some sort of compromise on space, crowded bunk beds with lots of people in there. Like, it just feels like a cabin. And the exposed wood, that was honestly my biggest challenge when we were building ours, was that the Raven House's original design had wood all along the interior. And when I got the quote for it, it was just one of the areas that I was like, we can always add this later, so we have to skip it now.
Right.
And so there's drywall, and I've struggled with that. That's why we added the tree walls to just
Yep.
bring some more wood in.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm,
I would say there's another element, and this is trickier to describe, but I think that cabins evoke an emotional response from people who enter into them
agreed.
in a way that houses don't. Like, houses can be impressive, you can be envious, you can just love it, you can feel comfortable, but there's something about the emotional response that people have to
Yeah.
cabins that is about, I don't know, warmth, cozy, safety. I don't know what it is, but,
Mm,
um, even, like, all my contractors who've ever worked on this space walk in like these dudes and in their Harley shirts, and they always let out a "Oh," or a oh,"
yeah. Yeah.
um, and that's harder to describe, but
And that doesn't happen in a house in the same way.
I don't think so.
No. And on this podcast, I would say we've had at least 5 to 10 people use the same phrase. And I don't think that it's that they're always listening to the other podcasts of just their blood pressure. You can like just feel it drop. And a lot of them will say on the road up to the cabin, but I think it still comes from that
Mm,
emotional connection to the space and you know what's coming. And then you
yeah,
walk in the doors and you're just like, oh,
yeah,
and you just kind of breathe out.
yep, yeah, totally, yep.
Yeah. How beautiful. What a great note to end on.
Yay! I'm so glad this happened.
This was such a treat.
Thanks so much for listening. And if you like what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcasts and a review. If you have any suggestions for guests or feedback, you can always find us on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and the Chalet Frame, spelled CHALA. See you next week, and thanks for joining us.